One of the best stories to tell is the story of what the consumer thinks. Because the one thing nobody can argue, from a board to anybody, is what the consumer thinks. You know, a purpose should be timeless. It should last forever if well constructed, because it should always challenge you to reconsider the future based on where you are now through the eyes of that purpose and the eyes of the world you're living in. When presented with a problem, I have a tremendous curiosity and detective-like determination to find what I call the truth. And the truth is...
My guest for this episode is Jeremy Schwartz, the former CEO of the Body Shop and Pandora. Jeremy started his career in marketing, working as a marketing director on iconic projects for L'Oreal and Coca-Cola. He's now a sought-after leadership and sustainability speaker and the chairperson of Kantar's sustainability practice. I first met Jeremy on the speaking circuit at the beginning of COVID, and I've always been impressed by his ability to simplify and distill complex ideas. So I wanted to get him on the show to share his insight. If you enjoy what you hear, please leave a review, like, comment, and subscribe. It would mean the world to me and will help this podcast reach as many people as possible. You don't want to miss this. Enjoy. Jeremy, welcome to the show. I'm going to put you on the spot. My first question for you, in life, and if we frame this around your kind of business life, what's the most important thing that you've ever had to pitch for?
That's a great question. I think it was the acquisition of a business in Brazil, which, you know, Brazil is a really tough market, an extremely tough market to do any business with. I was just with a gentleman yesterday discussing this very question, and we felt we needed this business to enter Brazil. And it was tough because the guy didn't need to sell particularly. And the Brazilians, as much as I love them, can be also very emotional in business and in life. And therefore, that was pretty tough because there were other people wanting to buy it, and we wanted to be there first.
So what sort of skill set did you need to make to create that emotional connection and get him to say yes?
That's I think, well, I know exactly what it was, that he actually created the business from an inspiration from the one I was working with that had inspired him to create it. He was able to sort of quote copy it a little bit because Brazil is so tough to enter as a foreign company. It's set up to exclude foreign entry in a way. And therefore, he had sort of a protected environment. So there was an emotional connection around the purpose of both companies. And, you know, I'm always interested in purpose and how that is a way to connect with people. And it was on that basis that we could connect.
Amazing.
And of course, money speaks. So when you start talking the sort of money you can make as a founder on sale, or you can offer to a founder, if you want to buy, you know, it's very hard to resist if the numbers look good.
If it's all right, good. In terms of wins, that sounds like an interesting pitch. Is there any that you reflect back on and you think I'd be really fascinated to see where that had gone if we'd have won? Is there one that got away?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it does need me just to reflect on. I suppose actually, you know, through my career, I have wanted to have different jobs or to create different jobs. And back in around 1997, gosh, so a long time ago, I was working for a fantastic company and everything was fantastic about it. But it was a European company, and I'm obviously being a bit not totally clear who it was. And things were a bit chaotic in a sort of Southern European way. And as much as I loved that again, a la Brazil, it just got to a point where I felt I needed to be more in an Anglo-Saxon logical environment. So I thought, right, I'm going to set up actually my own advertising company. But as I was going through the process, I was approached by a headhunter, and he said, look, Coca-Cola in town, and I think you should meet their chief marketing officer and their entourage. I said, look, you know, have you not read my lips? There is no way that I would want to work for the Coca-Cola company based on my impression of it from the outside. And anyway, I want to create my own business. So I went to the interview, and in each interview I said, look, just to tell you, I don't want to work for you. I'm here because the headhunter suggested it. But they were such an inspiring group of people. And the chief marketing officer was a unique person that was very famous in America. And they dangled the money directly in front of me. So a combination of being intrigued and the money meant I diverted myself from actually what I had wanted to do, because sometimes needs must, and I had a family and so on. So yes, I took that job. So I am intrigued to know what would have happened if I'd not done that, and where might my path have got to.
Yeah, fascinating. I want to come back to the Coca-Cola stuff a little bit later on, but you've had this amazing corporate career, most notably taking on the CEO roles for L'Oreal UK, the Body Shop and Pandora. But what is your story? Like, as a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
There were two things, actually, either an actor or a CEO, which does sound rather ridiculous. Well, they are, actually. There is an overlap. And the reason, there were two reasons for that, actually. One is, back in those days, there was a Vogue-like magazine. By that, I mean thick and glossy and sort of really intriguing. And it was just called Business. It doesn't exist, and I don't think it exists for 20 or 30 years. But it would profile business leaders in an incredibly glossy and interesting and intriguing way. And, I was just really always interested in business, and that magazine sort of was very inspirational. And I liked the idea of getting to the top of something. So it was only in my 30s did I go and do acting and take some plays to Edinburgh. But I did try to pursue the business route as my main focus.
That's really interesting. So what did you study? Where did you go on that kind of education journey?
Yeah. I mean, it's so hard for most people, other than those that were there, to imagine what it was like when we had 15% inflation. I think we had 15% interest rates to match it. We had 3 million unemployed. We had the potential of a global third world nuclear war with Russia. And it was like, okay, well, what sort of things should I study? I need to study something where there's a job at the end, and there's assurance of that. And I was interested in engineering and went to Sheffield to study material science, because I thought at the time that materials would be the future. With semiconductors, with materials for clothing. And, obviously that bet has turned out to be true more times than I can imagine. I didn't pursue that. So I did material science at Sheffield. Then I worked in a couple of gold mines and various mines. And then I did a postgraduate in production engineering at Cambridge University, and then decided not to be an engineer. So that was rather odd or disappointing in a way.
But how have you taken that engineer thinking into the roles you had? Because those formative years while we're at university, for me as an actor, that's played a massive part in who I am today. Although I don't act, there must be part of you that has that kind of logical and forensic way of thinking.
Totally. Well, I think first of all, all businesses have production engineering. Not all business, but but any business. Well, actually, we could say all businesses have some sort of process of creating something, whether it's a software company, you've got engineers creating software, whether it's AI, you've got data scientists, or you're making drinks or cosmetics or whatever. So I've always been interested in the production and supply chain end of the business, which some people aren't, and always interested in IT, which some people aren't. So without a doubt, there's been that, as you say, that logical or that end-to-end interest. I think maybe the end-to-end interest that's perhaps been most useful.
Yeah. I think what strikes me as being unique about you is you have that logic side, but you've also had a very successful career in the kind of marketing side, which is about emotion.
Yeah.
And I mean, you went to L'Oreal as a marketing director, and you were part of that Because I'm Worth It campaign, I understand. Like, how do you, as a team, start to generate those ideas and pitch those things, because that was unique and quite unusual at the time?
Well, first of all, I think you're probably the only person I've met who has identified something that I tried to grapple with, particularly when I was younger, which is this blend of creativity and mathematical sort of interest or logic and so on. And I never quite knew, as I'm more of a creative person, because I have a strong creative sort of sense, or am I more of a production engineering person and a logic person? So anyway, well done, because you're the only person who spotted that paradox or conundrum. But I think the thing actually that the thread that goes through undoubtedly is curiosity.
Yeah.
And when presented with a problem, I have a tremendous curiosity and detective-like determination to find what I call the truth. And the truth is something which is hidden below layers of apparent answers. And it's that doggedness to say somewhere here there's a human truth, and I'm very interested in the human truth. What is it that makes people buy something or want something or be motivated by something? I don't know why. I've just had always an innate, I would say, skill or talent, because it comes with no effort, but is an area of incredible interest. And it was actually through asking the question why at the time. And I have to take you back again to the early 90s when L'Oreal had women swishing their hair from left to right. And people in Britain were saying, number one, let's parody this crazy adverts, well, not crazy, but this formulaic adverts, which became quite mannequin-like. And also they said that L'Oreal is an expensive brand that isn't really probably worth paying the extra for.
Right.
So we had a human truth about the way people in Britain were looking at the brand, which was stopping it growing. And then also the final thing is the CEO had asked me to return to Paris to try and crack a problem they've been trying to crack for 7 years, which was the launch of Elsev, or the brand, which had failed several times, and to see if I, with my team, and I had a great team, could identify why it kept on failing in the UK and overcome that and launch a critical shampoo, or hair care brand, which was critical for the business. So those three things all came together and resulted in that advert, but also that shampoo brand, which became number one in the UK.
And when in the process do you kind of know instinctively that you've got it? Because there must be throwing stuff out, Post-its, whiteboards, chucking stuff at the wall and see what sticks. Like, when do you know, yes, I think this is going to work?
Well, let me explain what it feels like when it's not working. So as the CEO of Pandora, I was brought in because the business was, I'll use a bit of a strong word, tanking, but it was dropping very fast. The share price had become junk bond status. And I was asked to come in as a transformational CEO. And I applied my usual approach, which was, why is Pandora declining? And a person from a big consultancy, I was sort of giving it away there, told me that their analysis had shown that the company was in structural permanent decline, and that, there was nothing that could be done about it. It was a fashion item and it had run its day. Well, I didn't accept that, because I just believe our role is to find that demand. But with hours and hours of analysis with my team, I couldn't find what the problem was. And I was on a flight to Bangkok to see the founder. And I spent about an hour and a half in the toilet or in the loo with my head just leaning against the door, standing, because of the immense stress and just the weight of the problem on my shoulder, that I couldn't work out the solution, yet I knew it was out there somewhere. So it's by no means not a joyous journey always. There's always pain that you have to go through, because you're trying to uncover something that's hidden deeply. But once you get there, yes, you do have it. I'll give you an example. So actually with Pandora, I knew that we needed to have a new business purpose, a brand purpose. So I asked the consultancy with all the teams to work on this, and they worked on a number of stages. And I said, look, I'm just going to turn up to one of them. I don't want to be involved in it. I want to delegate. I'm the CEO. I shouldn't be involved in it. But I was there, and I was sitting in the back, and there was a bunch of guys, including a guy from Facebook, the ex-CEO, I think, of UK. And suddenly he just said something. And I said, stop, excuse me, we don't have to do this anymore. We can stop the whole program. This guy's just cracked it. Thank you. And he literally just said, why people buy Pandora is to give a voice to people's loves.
Oh,
and
wow.
he just said that. And I said, man, you've just nailed it. That is the purpose of the company. We're here to give a voice to people's loves. We don't need to do any more crafting or anything. So, part of it is being able to spot that moment, or that aha, as I call it, when either, I don't know everything and I don't always get it right, but I do know when I spot something. And actually, sorry, I'm talking quite a bit here. If you were, and people do write this very kindly on testimonials for my consulting, and they say, Jeremy can just cut to the heart of the matter. And I think that probably explains it. I can somehow zoom in and just cut to the heart of the matter. And that's, I can see quite laser-like sometimes what it is that we need to focus on.
I think that the heart of the matter is a really interesting choice of words, especially in the context of that, because there's something about the emotion that is created when those things align. So it's the logical brain, but also the emotional brain. And when when you said what the guy had said in the room, I literally got goosebumps like hearing those words, and there's something kind of instinctive about that. In corporate land, that's not always easy. So you were leading the innovation in Coca-Cola that created Coke Zero. I'm imagining there are a lot of naysayers in that environment. Human beings are naturally resistant to change. So when you think about pitching those sorts of big ideas into an organization, what steps do you need to take, or what ingredients do you need to have aligned to get people to say yes?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. And it's it's not a complicated answer. It's an answer that requires, I'm going to say three things that I use. The first, and one that's really evolved in the last few years, and one that I speak about, because as you know, I'm a speaker. And wherever I speak or whenever I consult and I talk about this, it's incredible how everybody goes, yes. And the first is the requirement for a business case. But as soon as I say the word business case, I don't know with you, but everybody's hairs at the back of their head normally go up, because actually nobody knows what a great business case looks like. And therefore, everybody's frightened to write a business case, because what is good? And nobody knows. So I've invented something, or not invented, in some jest, but I've used it all the time. So this isn't jestful, but the idea, I call it Jeremy's super simple business case. And yes, it does always bring a laugh, because it's actually just one page. And what I've got is one page which basically simply says that all decisions of any substance are made on the economic story of what is the incremental profit or sales, but sales and profit that this initiative brings over and above what exists. If you can, first of all, make that clear in your mind and to others, you can get decisions made, because basically everybody in business is wanting to do something that makes more money or gives a great return. And if you can show a great return or more money, well, you've overcome the first hurdle. But I can promise you, I almost never, ever, ever see that presented.
Interesting.
And I'll give you an example. I was working for a big PE company in their hotel business, and they didn't have the simple thing of Google Pay, PayPal, and Apple Pay for some reason on their website, though they were a big hotel chain. So it was clear to me that this is what we would do, but it was complicated. It is quite complicated. And I presented to the CEO, a man who's worth multiple billions and has run multiple billions. And I said, look, this is going to cost 10 grand. And I don't know why. The guy said, but that's 10 grand. Why are we spending that? That's ridiculous. I'm not even sure if I believe in it. He was whatever in his late 60s. Not that has any correlation to belief in Apple Pay. So I said, by the way, let me show you my super simple business case. It pays back in 3 weeks. Are you seriously saying that you're balking on £10,000 that has a payback of 3 weeks? Well, that simple word, the meeting went silent. We didn't need to discuss it anymore. Move on. So I think that's one thing. If you're happy for me to tell you another couple of things, the other thing is to do a lot of pre-selling work, i.e. to really get everybody on board behind the scenes, such that when you're actually asking for the decision, it's all been made already. And therefore, nobody has to sit in a room and be confronted with something and decide. You've sort of got them on board beforehand.
Sorry to interrupt, but before we continue with the episode, I've got a favour to ask. I'm on a mission to get this podcast in the hands of as many people as possible. So if you've found what you've heard so far valuable, please, please, please like, comment, rate and subscribe. These things make a huge difference to our reach. And if you're open to it, if you happen to know just one person, someone who, just like you, would benefit from listening to these conversations, then please share the podcast with them. Let's get on with it. I love the fact, going back to the kind of financial story, you said you called it a financial story. You didn't say I need to make the financial data clear. And I think that's so important. I talk a lot to businesses about the idea of storytelling, and I think sometimes it can be seen as fluffy, but it's actually about creating a compelling narrative. It's about allowing people to understand where they are in a journey, so that they can glimpse the future. If we know where we come from and know where we are now, then we can start to imagine what might be coming next.
I mean, Dominic, you again nailed it. And what's interesting is, and again, I've just been with a client, as you know, in Saudi, which is that one of the best stories to tell is the story of what the consumer thinks. Because the one thing nobody can argue, from a board to anybody, is what the consumer thinks. Because they're not, they can't sit and say, oh, I totally disagree with what the consumer thinks. So it's like, well, fool you then. So being able to bring the consumer into the boardroom, and I'll give you an example. I was also asked then, after Coca-Cola, to join Sainsbury's to see if I could help the fantastic MDs and CEO to create a turnaround strategy, because it'd been in decline for 10 years. And it's quite an interesting story, but I'm going to zoom in just one teeny bit. One of them was, well, hang on a minute. If I look at the shopper profile, the majority of shoppers are women, which at that time was true and probably is still true now. I have to be careful with my choice of words in this area. And so I went to the board and said, look, first of all, I want you all to realize, by the way, you're all guys, except for the MD, who's a lady. Our shoppers are women, and we need to get an insight about women. And it does sound almost ridiculous, but literally the board sort of had an aha moment as to the profile of the consumer, and we better understand what they want, not what these bunch of men think they want. And we better get some good insights about, what their needs are.
Yeah.
So it was from that I then did some interesting things. It was bringing the consumer into the boardroom that cracked it.
And when you've done those things, I have a sense that you've used this word already as we've spoken today, but you have a clear kind of sense of purpose and what's important for the consumer, but also for the brand, and how those two things align. How do you help organizations uncover what that purpose is? Because I think sometimes it can be, just a thing that's written on a boardroom wall, or it can be dormant and underlying. And how do you surface that and galvanize everyone around it?
Well, thank you for asking, because it is one of the areas that I have both a deep passion, but also a significant belief that I've got some thinking, which I paraphrased as a model called Make Your Purpose Count, where make and count are two acronyms for a bunch of work. And the work is that these aren't words on a wall. This is a fundamental daily tool to be used to animate the business, to get it to amplify what it stands for and achieve greater growth and performance and market share than if it was just pursuing a perceived journey. But it's funny, because I've done a number of these just recently, and it's actually the same journey. It's a journey of unpeeling the layers of an onion to identify what is core, but then it requires a creative leap. As you heard with Pandora, that there needs to be this leap that, again, I seem to have an innate feeling for. It's back to the same thing, which is, what is the human condition that people are seeking to satisfy through this company or this brand? But added to that is how it can be written in the language of, I'm going to say, songwriting, such that it requires only 2, perhaps 3, and at a push 4 or 5, but no more words to totally encapsulate the reason this company exists in a way that raises the hair, again, on the back of your neck or on your arms, such that you feel an emotional shift. And I can give you, if you would like me to give you one very quick example.
I'd love you to, yeah.
So I was working with an architect who is unique-ish because he only designs building for social housing, for the poorest of the poor, big, huge blocks of flats and so on, social housing. He's also completely committed to sustainable building. But his purpose or his motivation, because we'll come to the purpose, is that the poorest of the poor should have the same emotional experience from architecture as the richest of people. Why should architecture, which is about design, be limited in value to the richest when it's about an approach? It's not necessarily about cost. When you open the door and you're really poor and you're coming into a block of flats, your heart you should have a skip because you're walking into a place that makes you feel good. That's what he wants to achieve. And I said, okay, you're not an architect. The words from speaking to you on a Zoom calls like this came to me, and they do sometimes just come. I said, no, you're into uplifting human spirits. That is your purpose. That is what you do. You're not designing buildings. You are in the creation of an environment that uplifts human spirits. And he just said, oh God, you've nailed it. That's exactly what I'm about. And then I said to him, so, as part of this journey of business, and we were doing a business planning, what is it you dream of achieving in your career? And then so on. He said, I'd love to win the Sterling Prize for Architecture, which is only won so far by multinational, big, ginormous commercial constructions. So internally, I sort of slightly laughed because I said, okay, well, that's very nice. But okay, why don't we agree this? Why don't we say you're going to win it in 5 years? We'll work on a plan to do that. And I then finished the work with him, and I was on LinkedIn. And just 2 years later, this was in 2023, he won the Sterling Prize for Architecture.
Wow.
For a community center for old people. It's the first social building that won, the first environmental building that won. And in the blurb from the judges, they said, he lived as an architectural firm, clearly his purpose, which is to uplift human spirits. And this building does that for old people who can now connect and socialize and not live alone. So, that it can lead, if well used, to transformation of companies if used in that way.
One of your kind of, most significant roles was as CEO of Body Shop, and obviously sort of stepping into Anita Roddick's iconic shoes is not something that can be easy, and a business that has a kind of clear purpose there. How do you pitch the next evolution of an organization in those circumstances?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I was actually taking over from a CEO who had taken over from Anita.
But her legacy lives on.
Yeah, but her legacy was complete. And to be honest, it was, a purpose should be timeless. It should last forever if well constructed, because it should always challenge you to reconsider the future based on where you are now through the eyes of that purpose and the eyes of the world you're living in. I'll give you one quickly, that I love, which is NASA's is to explore the heavens. Well, whether it's the James Webb Telescope or the first Challenger or the first Apollo, they're all doing the same thing. So it's a timeless idea. What had happened, in my view, with the Body Shop, because of course it's gone, having been sold and sold again, and this was a bunch of years ago. I left in 2017. It's gone downhill dramatically. Was that it had two things: a purpose that was confusing and complicated, and one in which the company had not nourished and reinvented itself against it.
Yeah.
So you can have a purpose and all the rest and be a pioneer, as she was, by a long, long, long way. A pioneer, one can also determine, because people laughed at her at the start to say, I'm going to create a sustainable, environmentally conscious, human conscious company. Just as people probably laughed at Elon saying, I'm going to send a space rocket that will land in a chopstick, but he has achieved it. But what had happened was they just for too many years had sort of rested on the laurels of their pioneering spirit, and others like Lush and many others had overtaken them and taken the headspace of consumers.
Yeah.
So we weren't able worldwide to reinvigorate the spirit, though I did with a team. We went to the Amazon to try and really reconnect. This is coming back to how do you create a purpose? You've sometimes got to get to the place where people are, not sitting in an office trying to do this, which is a big mistake. And since we bought lots of ingredients from the Amazon and those countries in South America, we went there, and it was sitting on the side of the Amazon that we wrote a new purpose, which was to enrich, not exploit. That, the Body Shop had always been about enriching people, women or people who are disadvantaged in any way, enriching the planet by being environmental and having products that, enriched how you felt.
Yeah.
But never exploiting anybody, the growers, the consumers, or anybody else. So, and that enabled us to then do a bunch of initiatives which did grow the company, particularly in the UK. We were growing and very profitable. So yes, you can reinvigorate a business, but you've got to invest against it. And Got to commit to it.
In your private life, I know that you love being up the top of mountains. I've seen photos of you summiting various peaks, and I know that you're also a trustee of the Against Malaria Foundation.
Yeah,
those sort of sustainability issues, the social responsibility issues, they seem to be an important driver in your life, and you're also the chairperson of Kantar's Sustainability and Diversity Transformation practice. How do you think that leaders and sales teams should be building these topics into what they do? Because I think sometimes they can be seen as, the things that HR do, things for the board, but not necessarily for people on the ground.
I have a speaking subject called profit from sustainability. And the reason I put that word there is that the cynics in our society assign the word cost to sustainability as a way to neutralize any interest and to ridicule it, that it will cost more. And, where I've been, again, coming back to that question about business cases, is focused on let's show the profit that this can deliver. Not because I necessarily want to always say, that the world is only driven by profit and that's the only measure, but it's the way to get engagement of a business community and a global government community that is driven by that. So we need to talk their language or their story, as you said. Therefore, I've got a number of great examples of where, by focusing on social and environmental sustainability, we've dramatically increased the value of companies. And it started in 2002, or really 2004 at Sainsbury's, where my team and I created something called Active Kids, which, has trained 56 million kids in the UK since 2005 in being active in sports, and 9,000 teachers have been trained in it. And it definitely contributed to the turnaround and added, the company added about 6 to 10 billion of shareholder value. And this was definitely a platform to that reconsideration by consumers in Britain. So why do I think people should be engaged? One, because it's the right thing to do. Two is because actually consumers and talent are wanting to see companies that are interested.
Yeah.
But three is if you construct it right, it's going to make you money because it's bringing new, interesting stories where, a lot of businesses and brands just keep churning out the same boring wallpaper. And this is a way to cut through and get reconsideration. So that's why I think you should do it, because I think it makes great business sense. Not in every case, but in many cases, if well constructed.
Fabulous advice.
You can see I'm rather passionate about it.
I can, absolutely. Jeremy, there's so much that we could cover, and I might have to get you back on to delve into some of those questions. But if I can take you back, if you could give one final piece of advice to that young boy that was reading that glossy business magazine, what would you go back and say to him?
Yeah, it's a question I'm having to deal with today, and I'm asking lots of people the same one. Let me tell you, I have somebody who means a lot to me, and he's struggling with knowing what the right career direction is one of my sons. And I've actually been going out to speak to people and say, tell me, what advice do you think I should give? And near enough everybody, and I've got now so many stories, have said, the place that I ended up, is not where I started. You can't predict the journey of life and the career of life. So I think within that, where I think I would say is go into different functions and different areas of expertise so that you get a broad footprint. That's what I did, but much later in life. Don't be narrow cast and singular necessarily, but rather get a breadth of skills by taking different roles so that you are a better, more complete CEO because you've got that breadth, and that's good, and that would be my advice, with a little twinge of something else, which is ambition. Be ambitious, because I feel that we have a responsibility to ourselves to make the most of the talents we're given, whatever talents they are, and therefore be ambitious brings those to the fore.
Fabulous advice. Jeremy, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Why Life's a Pitch podcast. If you'd like to improve the way you pitch and communicate, I'm giving away a special gift to all my listeners. we've developed the Pitching with Impact scorecard to help you benchmark your pitch performance in 6 key areas. It'll take you less than 5 minutes to complete, and you'll receive a detailed, personalised report packed full of insights and ideas to help you improve and grow. Just head over to dominiccolenso.com/scorecard to get started.